The new relighting tools in Flame Premium give you total control over the look of your final composite, with new tools for adding cast shadows, lens flares, edge rays, and other lighting effects directly into the 3D space of action. Bridge the gap between the 3D compositing workflow you've traditionally associated with Flame and next-generation 3D creative tools for look development. So here we see a very simple composite inside Action. We have a woman walking toward the camera in this bamboo forest. And if we take a tour in the schematic view of the 3 layers that we're working with here, you can see we have the foreground layer, which is the woman cut out using a garbage mask. We then have some of the bamboo trees cut out, also using a garbage mask. Let's go ahead and take a look at the mat for that layer. And finally, we have our background. And all of these layers have been offset in 3D space, but not for doing any 3D compositing. The only thing we want to do here is deal with adding lighting effects. So if we go to the node bin inside Action and look at the Relighting tab, I'm going to start by just adding a light into the scene. So I'll drag that light up, and you can see right away it behaves exactly as you would expect. So what we want to do is move that light forward in front of our foreground elements to light them and also increase the intensity a bit. And I'm going to switch to one of the new light types. Here I'm going to use the ellipse area light, adjust the spread, make some adjustments to the various parameters, and also adjust the intensity. And you can see that this light, as I rotate it around, is falling off across the various layers in 3D space. Next, I'm going to add another light to the scene. So let's go back to the Relighting menu and bring another light to light the right side of the screen. We'll move that light back a bit and also adjust the intensity. Let's make it about 50% of its original intensity. Now this is what's really exciting. If I go back to that first light, back to the node bin into the Relighting menu, I'm going to bring in a shadow cast object and attach it to that light. I'm going to change it to be a 2.5D shadow type because these are flat layers, and I'll also adjust the softness a bit. And now when we start to move that light around, you're going to see that we're getting true cast shadows from that light in that scene. What's really great is if I want to also have lights shadow cast from the other light, I simply attach that in the schematic view, and now we're getting shadows cast from the other light's point of view. So you can instance the shadow cast object inside of Action. And of course, each of the lights can have their own unique shadow cast object. Now, if I don't want any of my elements to be affected by the light, I can also turn off the lighting for any of the objects or layers in my scene. So now the background is no longer getting any of the cast shadow on it. And of course, I can animate the position of the light over time to get a neat casting shadow effect on the tree behind it. So you can see now, as I move my position of my light, we can change the position of the shadow cast behind it. We can do the same thing for the light on the left side, a little bit more of a subtle cast shadow because the intensity of the light is at 50%, but you can see that we can really change the way things look inside of Action based on the shadow casting. Let's add a third light to the scene. This is where it starts to get really exciting because now we're going to start to apply different kinds of lighting artifacts to our scene. So in the schematic, I'm just going to bring that light, the third light, over a little bit, and back to the node bin in the Relighting tool, I'm going to add a lens flare effect. Now, lens flares are nothing new. Of course, we've been using lens flares for years, but check out some of the unique properties of this lens flare object. First of all, it's very interactive, and it's embedded into the heart of Action, so I can adjust how it interacts with the scene. Basically, I can see it interact with the 3D objects in my scene. I can do things like change the color of this light. So I'm going to pick up some of the color from the background to get it to integrate into the scene. So now I have more of a greenish color for my lens flare object. And what's really exciting, if I adjust the intensity, as it moves behind those various matte layers in true 3D space, because it's behind those objects, we're going to get natural occlusion effects coming from that light and its lens flare object. If it goes behind something, just like something would do in the real world, it's going to get blocked out and occluded so that we don't see it temporarily, and then when it reappears on the other side of the mat, it's going to be there. So let's temporarily hide that lens flare object and show you another really cool object that came into Flame Premium 2012, and that's the raise object inside the Relighting menu. If we add a raise object to our scene, notice that what's happening by default is a beam of light is being generated from our light. It's almost like a flashlight type effect. And if we go in and start to position the pivot point, let's make it closer to the camera. Kind of position it at the point of view of the camera here, and we adjust the spread, you'll see that what we're really getting is true volumetric edge rays effects from that rays object attached to that same light. So this is really cool. And of course, it has all the same properties that we could apply to the lens flare. We can pick up colors from the background. Let's pick up a yellowish color and apply that to our volumetric edge rays object. And again, all the occlusion is all there as well. And if we unhide the original lens flare that we had created, we'll bring that back to the scene. The combination of the lens flare effect and the edge rays object volumetric edge rays effect is combined just by positioning that light. And you can see it's all happening in 3D space. These are not pasted effects on top of our composite. They're actually interacting with the various layers and objects in true 3D space. So this is a very sophisticated set of relighting tools inside of Action. It also can work in stereo. So if we just turn on a stereo camera, this effect would also be applied to the left and the right eye. It could automate that process for you when doing your stereo work. Next, I'm going to animate the position of this light with the lens flare and rays object over time. And as we position it here on the last frame to go behind the woman, I'm going to adjust the intensity. And what you'd expect to see here is that she would start to go into a silhouette. So what I'm going to do to fix that is to use the foreground lights to remove the light from the scene. And if we just bring those two foreground lights that we started with, the intensity of those lights down to 0, now she's going to be completely in silhouette. So you can use the lights to add or remove light from a 3D scene. And as we scrub through the timeline now, we see our lens flare, we see our rays, our volumetric rays being occluded as they move behind the various objects. We can position, again, in this case, the pivot point of our rays object toward the camera to create a very dramatic effect. And what I'd like to just sort of wrap up with by saying is that you can imagine the power you will have in finishing when you start to combine these lighting tools with the real-time color grading capabilities of Flame Premium.